Hello and welcome, I'm Dave. In today's lesson, we'll add a React table with pagination, filtering, and sorting in Next.js. I'll provide a link to all resources in the description. And I'll also provide a link to join my Discord server where you can discuss this Next.js Full Stack project with fellow students, ask questions, and help each other out. Hey guys, a big shout out and thank you to Sentry for making this full stack Next.js educational video series possible. Sentry is defining debuggability in full stack web applications, and I consider Sentry to be an essential part of my tech stack. From error reporting, logging, and tracking to identifying performance issues with tracing, to user session replays, and much more, Sentry will help you write and ship code that delivers exceptional user experiences. Follow the Sentry links in the video description or just visit Sentry.io and use the code davegray to get 3 months of the Sentry team plan for free. In this Next.js Full Stack Project series, I'm using the same tech stack that I've been working with on a major project at my job over the past year. For viewers, students, and subscribers that have asked what I work with on a daily basis, this is definitely the tutorial series to watch. And we're starting today with the user stories open. We're looking at user story number 4 once again. Show a real-time open tickets page after login. And we'll accomplish most of that today. So we'll be looking at checking this off probably in the next lesson, but we have completed a lot. And if we look at our full user stories list, there's only a couple of other things we haven't checked. And there's 2 more lessons to go after today. So after that, we'll be working on those last 2, completing our list and deploying our project in those last 2 lessons. And now I've got the user stories closed here in VS Code. We're going to scroll up to our lib directory. Inside of there, let's open up the queries directory. And let's go to get ticket search results because we want to update this query just a little bit. So let me go ahead and close the file tree so we can see everything a little bit more clearly. And let's add a couple of things that we didn't originally add to this query. We're going to need the ID. So we want to have tickets.id. And we're also going to need the completed status. So let's have completed here, and that is tickets.completed. Now, much like we did with the customers query in the last lesson, we can also update this where clause because we're not going to search in all of these fields. I don't think that's necessary because we're not going to show all of them in the table either. So let's go ahead and remove the tickets.description. We'll just be searching the title when we search for a ticket, as well as for the tech, we'll have them. First name and last name, we're going to handle that differently, just like we did with the customers search. So we'll get rid of those individuals. Then we'll have the email and phone, but we can get rid of address 1 and 2. Let's go ahead and keep the city, and I'm going to remove the state. I mentioned in the last lesson as well that that's a preference. Maybe you would want to leave that in there depending on the location possibility of the repair shop or what the owner, what your stakeholder for the application wants. But that's what I'm going to leave in here. And then we're going to go ahead and add in that joint first name, last name, so we can actually search with those together or possibly even the initials of the customer or some combination of that. So instead of typing that once again, I'll just open the file tree and let's look at the get customer search results because it's identical. So I'm going to press Alt-Z to wrap this down so we can see it all here, but it's this line right here that starts with the SQL that we import from Drizzle up here above. So I'm going to copy this and then let's go back to our get ticket search results. I'll hide the file tree with Control-B once again. I'm going to paste this in, and of course we're going to have to update our imports. Alt-Z to wrap it down. You can see we need to import that up here at the very top. So let's go ahead and add SQL to our imports. And now we've got the same line here in our where clause because we've joined the customers table to this query. So it's a little bit different than the query we had just for customers that was only coming from the customers table. This one combines the tickets and the customers, and we can look at the fields from both tables. Now I want to add one additional thing here at the end of the query, but here at the top, I'm going to need to bring in one more import from Drizzle. It's ASC, which stands for ascending. Then we're going to put an order by clause right here at the end. So dot order by, then we'll say ASC, and inside of ascending, we'll say tickets dot created at. So the very first ticket we see in our search results should be the oldest one, or at least it would be tied with several others if they were created on the same date. So we want to go from the ascending, the oldest date, ascend towards the newest date. And of course, if we reverse that sort order, which we'll be able to do with our table by the end of this lesson, then it would be descending. But we're going to start out with the state of the ascending tickets created at date. So we'll see the oldest first, which I think that's what you would want to do with repairs as well as shipping things. If you were working in a different industry, you would want to do what they call first in, first out. So you would probably want to see and work on the oldest first. Now there's one more important thing we need to do in this file, and that's because of this query. Previously, we created types with Drizzle Zod, and they were just based on our tables, but this is a query that joins two tables, so we can't provide the type quite as easily. So let's go ahead and export the type of this query below. We'll say export type, and I'm going to call it ticket search results type. I'll set this equal to awaited, and then we use return type. And then inside of that, we'll say type of, and we'll put our function, get tickets search, or it's ticket, I'm sorry. So get ticket search results. And now this will give us the type of our query. And you can follow this pattern for other queries too. So anytime that you need to create a type for your Drizzle query, you can follow this type of pattern. And it comes in very handy. So there is our type, and we'll be using it. And we can also use this type actually for our other query that we need to update. So let's look at this. And so we won't have to create another type there, but it's our get open tickets. So we're just going to make sure we get the same fields, so we'll have the same return type here. So I'm going to also add ID as we did. So tickets.id. And then down here at the bottom, I'll add completed. It's tickets.completed. And there's nothing else that we really need to add to this query because it's already bringing in exactly what it's supposed to, only the open tickets. And that's what we want to see by default on the tickets page, which has essentially become our home page. But I almost forgot, we should also add the order by clause to this query so they have the same exact order when they come out. So let's go ahead and do that as well. We've imported ASC at the top, so .order by, then we'll say ASC, and then we'll have tickets.created at. There we go. And with our Drizzle query updates complete, let's go ahead and scroll up now. We want to look inside the app directory, then inside of our RS group directory. And then after that, we're going to create the ticket table component right here, just like we have ticket search, which we also did for customers where we have the customer table component. So let me open up the customers one first. And as you might guess, many things about the table are going to be the same. We're just going to add much more to the tickets one. So I'm going to start with Control A to copy the code from the customer table, Control C, I should say Control A to select, Control C to copy. And then I'm going to come back to the ticket search component. I'll just click on that so I'm in the correct directory. Create a new file, call it tickettable.tsx. And I'm going to paste in the code from the customer table with Control V. And after that, we will make changes, just so I don't have to retype everything. But a lot of this will stay the same and will more or less be adding to this file. So Control B to once again hide the file tree so we can see everything here. So the first thing we'll know is the type isn't going to be the select customer schema type. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. Instead, we're going to import that type we just created from our query. So ticket search results type. There we go. And it comes from our lib queries get ticket search results file. After that, the TanStack table, React table imports are going to be the same to start. Now, as we add more features, we'll be importing more here, but we don't need any more to at least get the table started. And the same with shadcn here. This is going to be the same imports for the table. Now, after that, I'm going to scroll for just a little bit of room, and I'm going to add some imports here right after the shadcn components. So I'll say import Now on separate lines, I'm going to say circle check icon, and then I also want circle X icon. And now both of these are going to come from Lucid React. So those are a couple of icons we're going to use inside of our table when we display results. After that, use router stays the same, and we're ready to work on our types here. So this type needs to change. Now this was an object type, and so we put the array after it. Our results from the Drizzle query are already an array, so we want to delete all of that, including the array notation at the end. So here, data is just going to be equal to the ticket search results type. And then once again, when we have our type down here in the columns header array, we'll scroll down and add that as well. Well, really, I don't want to add it there. Let's just create a convenience type up here at the top so we don't have to type the single element every time. So what I'm going to say is type row type, and I'm going to set this equal to ticket search results type, and then I want to just single out the first element there so we have that single type. And after that, we can use row type when we come down here and set up our column header array. And of course, we don't have the right fields in here necessarily for that row type at this point, but we will. So immediately you can see some of these fields are not the ones that are returned in our query. So we just need to make those match up. So let's change all of the fields in here and put them in the right order that we want in our table as well. So I'm going to have ticket date. After that, I'm going to have title. Then I'm going to put the tech. After that, we'll go ahead and put first name. Then let's have last name. Then finally, the customer's email, and then one more field here at the end will show whether it's completed or not. Now, of course, the default results will only show the ones that are open. But if we were to search for other tickets, for example, then the results we'd get back could be mixed between open and completed. So we definitely want to display that for use when that happens, when you're searching for individual tickets. Now, as we look at our create column helper, this just needs to switch over to that convenience type that we created, the row type, and that creates the column helper. Now we're going to have quite a bit more involved here as we create the columns. And I feel like I'm going to need to break this down bit by bit because this part can be confusing. So the first line is going to be the same. We're still mapping over the column headers array that we created up here. So these are the headers we're going to have in our table. We're mapping over that. Now the column helper dot accessor is what's returned. And this accessor can just accept the column name like we are passing in here as we previously did for the customers table, but it can also accept a function. And that's what we're going to do here. And this is where we would want to transform any data that would be in our table. So what this function accepts is the row, not just a column. So we've got the row here. We'll make this an arrow function. Now we can do some things inside of this arrow function. So the first thing I'm going to do is once again just a convenience. I'm going to define value. I'm going to set this equal to row, and I'm going to pass in the column name we have. So that gives us the value that we're working with. And this will go through every value in the row. So now that we have that value, I can just use it instead of typing row brackets column name every time. But now I'm going to look to see which row, or which I should say, which column that we're currently working with. So I'm going to say if column name equals ticket date. Now we have to really start thinking about the types, because React Table's good about inferring the different types, but anytime we start transforming data, then we've got to put in some type guards and just verify what type of data we're working with and returning. Most of the time, I want string data to show in the table, but sometimes I need to format that, and that's what I want to do with the ticket date. So here I'm going to say, if it's ticket date and now I need the type guard, value, which is the value we just defined, is an instance of date. Then I want to do something inside of the if statement here. So then I'm going to say return. So we're returning this arrow function that has the row up here. This will be the return for it. We're going to return value dot to local date string. I'm going to put in English US as the locality here. And then I'm going to define this as year, numeric, month, 2-digit, and finally day, 2-digit. So this is going to read like I would typically read a date here in the US. So if it was December 12th, it would be 12 for the month / 12 for the day / then have the year after that. So the year's numeric should be 2024, I believe, or maybe just 24. We'll take a look what we get at the end of that. But overall, that's going to format the date. You may want to format it differently, but this would be the place to do it. And it's going to return this for that column. So that would be the type of value you'd have in that column. Now I need to look for one more here. So I'm going to say if column name equals completed. Now, if you go back and look at the schema for our data, you'll notice all the other fields I'm pulling in are varchar inside, or var characters, variable characters inside of the data table, which is typically a string. So you could look at our Drizzle schema and see that. But here, this is Boolean data, and here, this is a timestamp. So I'm really singling out the two types of data that aren't your typical strings. And otherwise, I don't need to do everything with each piece of data because those will just come back and they will go to the table as strings. So here, with this Boolean data, I need to look at the value once again. So I'm going to say return value, but I'm not just returning the value here. I'm actually looking at the value because I'm going to use a ternary statement. So I'll come down to the next line, put my question mark. So if true, so if we have a Boolean of true, I want to return the string completed. If it's false, I want to return the string open. Okay, after that, for any other column that comes in, we're just going to return the value. So it's as if we didn't touch it to begin with. So at the beginning, we define this value. Then we look for any columns that we want to inside of this accessor function that receives the row. And eventually we return here. And you can do much more in here, kind of anything you need to do. Just think of this function as where you would want to transform any data here. So I'll put, just next to this, I'll put transformational. And we'll think about it that way. Now with the accessor function completed, we'll look at the second part here. And so we have our comma after the function, and now this is where we define the ID. We'll leave that as is, and for now we'll leave the header as is. When we start to add sorting to our columns, we'll come back to the header. But I'm going to put a comma after that as well because we're going to add one more property here, and this is cell. So where I said the accessor function above was transformational, this function applies to every cell, so it's more presentational. Now, what would be passed in, you often see represented as info, but what we're going to do is just take one method from info, so we can destructure that here as get value. So if you just saw info passed in, which is how it's usually represented, then you would see info.getValue to call the method, but we're just destructuring get value here. After that, we'll go ahead and complete the arrow function, and I'll put a note out beside this, just like I did for transformational. This one we'll say is presentational, as it applies to every cell. Okay, inside of this now, I'm going to have that convenience definition again. So I'll say get, or const value equals get value. So I'll just call that. Now after that, I'm going to check, I guess I don't need that extra line, but I'm going to start a conditional here. So if column name equals completed, then inside of here, I'm going to go ahead and return, and inside of the return, I'll have a div. So I'm going to say div, put a class name here, and I just want to center the content of completed cells. So here I'm going to use grid, then place content center, which is pretty much the easiest way to center something with a couple of classes in Tailwind, at least that I know of. After that, I will go ahead and say value, and we'll check that value. And if the value is open, remember we changed the values above. We already transformed the data. So it's not coming in here as Boolean. It's going to either be open or completed. We'll say if it's open, then we're going to use the circle X icon, be imported, and we could put class names on it as well. But we really only need one that I'm going to use. So I'm going to say class name, opacity. I could spell opacity. There we go, -25. So really it's going to make it a little lighter so we see the background coming through it as well. Then we can just close that out. And then I'll go ahead and put in the false condition. Let me wrap this down with Alt-Z. So this will be the other icon, the circle check icon. Here we'll have this a class name equals, and let's put text dash green dash 600, then close that component out. So if they're open, we'll be showing the circle X icon. And if they're already completed, we'll be showing the green check. So this circle X will probably look a little gray because we're just going to fade in, but it will change with the theme, so we can see how the table looks either way. So this is what we're going to display then, presentational, we're going to display inside of the cells, but above transformational is where we change the Boolean to these strings, either completed or open. And you'll see when we apply the filters why it's important to have something that we might be able to type rather than just have true or false. So this would be important as well. So the string data comes in pretty handy when you're typing and filtering in columns. But we're not quite finished because this is if it's completed, only if it's that column. So after we do all of that, we still need to remember to return the value here at the bottom. So otherwise, we're just going to return whatever was sent in to this function. But if not, then we're going, if it's the column name completed, then we're going to actually process it like this. I think only one more change we need to make before we go ahead and look at our initial table. And so I'm going to scroll down here, and that's the link. Remember, we're linking every row to the edit page. So here we don't want to link to the customer's edit page. We want to link to the tickets. So we'll go to /tickets/form, and we'll have ticket ID as the param, and row.original.id is still exactly what we want for the value. Okay, with the final change made here in the ticket table, we're ready to look at the basic version of that. Let's go back to the file tree now, and we need to add it to the page.tsx inside of the tickets segment. So at the top here, I'm going to import, and then we want ticket table, and that's going to come. Oh, we still have it named customer table, don't we? The one thing that I missed. So let's go back to ticket table here. Scroll up and actually rename the function rename it ticket table. We had customer table because I pasted in, but it did save a lot of time, but sometimes we miss something like that. Okay, we're ready to import ticket table now. And yes, it could come from .ticket table, but I'm going to match that with the @ symbol, then look at the app directory. And then after that, RS. After that, we should be looking at tickets, and then it's ticket table. Okay, now we've got the import. We're ready to use it here in our page because right now we're still just providing these JSON stringified results. So let's replace the JSON stringify here with our ticket table component. But first, we're going to check the results.length. And I'm going to talk about strategies here and options you could actually do depending on what you want the app to respond like, but we're going to go with this pattern for now. So ticket table, I'm going to set the data equal to the results that we've got. After that, let's go ahead and close out that component, and then we can put in the false part of the ternary, which is just null, Alt-Z to wrap that down. So there's the full line now. So we're checking the results length, and if we have results, then we're going to render the ticket table. Remember, this is a server component. So really what's happening is we're awaiting the results. So that happens before we ever get here. We're going to come up here and either have results or not. Then we'll check that. And if we don't, we just don't render the ticket table component. And that's the pattern that I also followed in the customer component, or the customer segment, if you will. So we'll talk about, of course, another option that you could do and how that discussion came up. But first of all, let's just go ahead and get this working. So I'm going to copy this same line and come down here under the ticket search and paste it right here too, because we're also getting results here. They're just different results. These are specific search results depending on what was entered based on the search text. This is the get open tickets query, so it's bringing in all the open tickets. So that line works in both places. Let's go ahead and save this page now for the ticket segment, and we should be ready to look at this in the browser, and I can talk a little bit more about the strategy here and the strategy in the customer segment. Let's go ahead and open up a terminal window, type npm run dev, start up the application, and I'll meet you at the home page in the app. And I've got the application open, and here is our table. Everything looks pretty good for the basic table, and this is the ticket segment, which has essentially become the home page of the application, and should be able to edit one of these if we click on ticket. So this, of course, in dev mode, it'll take just a moment to render, but it should then navigate to the edit page, and then after that, any others shouldn't take as long. So here I've got ticket number 4, Jane Smith. I can't remember if that's where I clicked or not, so let me see. Jane Smith, yep, ticket number 4. Go back to that. It doesn't take as long to re-render it. The tech ID is not showing up there, so we can assign one. I think the tech ID was previously davegray@gmail, so we may have to look into why that's not showing up. Let's go ahead and come back here. And yeah, I don't have the ticket ID right there. So let's go ahead and set that once again, see if it sets okay when we come back. And I'll click completed here. So we're going to at least have one that's completed. Right now, all 16 tickets that I have in the database are open. So let's go ahead and save these changes. It says it's successfully saved. So now let's go back to that tickets page. And it looks like that one's no longer here because we were only looking for the open ones. So you can see our icon over here on the right indicates none of these are completed. So now let's search for Dave. And you can see now the tech is davon11@gmail, and it says it's completed, and we've got the green icon over here. So we did get our search result as well. Let's search for just initials like J space S for Jane Smith. And yes, we also got Johnson because J, and then we've got space here that the wildcard covers all of that, and then the S. So Jane Smith and Alice Johnson were both brought here, and you can see the one completed ticket that we worked on here before. Let's go ahead. I'm just curious, if I go back to the edit page, am I going to see that? Yeah. We see the tech ID now, so I might have to look into why that didn't show up before, but I haven't found that bug yet. Of course, leave a comment in the video. You can crowdsource this as well, see if there's any other reason that it didn't show up. Now let's talk about the loading state here. So first of all, let me just clear out the search params at the top, hit enter, and this loads in the basic page, and you saw everything load in there fairly quickly. But immediately, the tickets page renders the table because we should really always have results. Now, we do have null in that server component that I showed in case the results are empty, and we could put in a message that said no open tickets or something like that if you wanted to. Of course, the business might go out of business if they didn't have any open tickets, but that would be an option to put in there. So we could try something like that, and we could test it out with passing down an empty array instead of those results. So that would be an option. But basically, this page is always going to render a table of results. It should always, whether it's the open tickets or one we're searching for, like passing in DG. We didn't get anything because I'm not in there as a customer, but Dave, there I am. So when there isn't anything at all, so here's an example of there not being anything. we're just not getting a table on the page because that customer table component doesn't render. Now that's what I like to see, but maybe you would want something that would say no results, and that would be what we should put back in that customer or the ticket segment. But besides that, we're always rendering a table. So for Jane, there we get the results. Now this table, notice what this table does. It will stay in place because it's already rendered from the server. It will stay in place while the other query is getting results. So when we get that pending status from use form status, you see the spinner up here on the search button. That kind of gives you the indication that we're looking for the results for another search. So let me go ahead and put in Bob's name now. I'll press enter. You'll see the spinner on the search, but this table is going to continue to show us Jane Smith results until it renders the new component. And remember, we're awaiting that data on the server. So then the server, it's a dynamic server component. It renders the new table. So you won't see a space in here where the screen is blank between the table changing. So now it happened fairly fast, but now we have the table with Bob. So you're not going to see like a loading phase between those tables. You're either not going to have a table with this pattern, or you're going to see table results until the new table results are ready. And that's what I wanted to talk about, because I had a comment on the customers page from the last lesson. Somebody had said, hey, I'd really like to see a loading state here in the big area of the page. Now, the reason I'm not doing that is I don't like a lot of page flashes between, and it happens really fast when you're loading data quickly. So you just see a quick flash of a loader. And if it took longer, you'd actually see that loader, but that would be rare. I'd rather see the results longer on the page, or just no results at all. And again, we'll go back and put that no results message if we search for something that doesn't provide any results. But overall, you're going to see the loading state in this button. So we are giving an indication, and I'd rather continue to see results until they switch. But that's a preference. So I want to talk about what you can do, what you can change in the pattern if you want to see a big loader here on the page. And I'm not going to provide the exact code for it, but I've actually mocked it up in a side code branch here that I've got, and I can show you what it looks like, and then you can decide if you want that or not. Okay, this is just a quick detour back to the customers to show you what it looks like if you put a big loading state here. So right now we don't have any results, and we've got the page set to not show anything when it first loads, and that's ideal. We don't want to say no results found when we first load the page. But if I search for Dave, press enter, you quickly saw a spinner here and a spinner here, and they're in sync because we're using the same use form status pending. You don't want to have two different loading states in a race condition or something like that. You want to use the same one. So we've got some results here. Let me search for all the customers with the @ symbol. It just takes a little bit, but really I'm seeing a flash between each one. Maybe you like that, and maybe you don't. I prefer to just continue to see those results till they show up and I can see it searching here. But if you do like how this works, I'm going to tell you how to restructure the project. It's not something I'm going to do. Okay, to restructure this project to use the same loading state, so you don't use two different loading states, use form status works on child components of the form. So what you're going to want to do is go inside of your customer search component. First of all, you won't want to put the customer table component inside of the server component. You want to make it a child, or import it into the customer search component, and then put it at the bottom of the form before the closing form tag. So what you're going to have to do then, of course, is pass the data down from the server to the customer search component and then pass it in to the customer table component. Now your decisions about what to show here, if there's no results at all, when I just pressed enter here, then I'm showing a blank screen. I want the page to load like this for the customers. But then if I search for ZZZ, for example, and I get no results found. So how am I doing that? Well, I'm using the use search params hook here. So if I'm using use search params and I'm checking to see for that search text param up here, then if I search for something, so if the param exists, then I've got no results found. But otherwise, if I come in and I'm just really not searching for anything at all, basically, see, I've still got the param, but no value. So that value doesn't exist. Then I've got the blank page. Now, if I get results, I'm showing the table, but all of those decisions are now made not on the server, but they're made on the client side. And that way you can, of course, use that use form status as a child. So I just wanted to walk you through that. If anybody wants to see the code for that, maybe I could make a quick gist that would be separate from the actual series, because I didn't really want to do it that way, but I did want to show that it could be done. Back in VS Code, before we start working on pagination, I'm here once again in the server component for tickets. Let's go ahead and replace this null with the no tickets found message, because we always expect to have tickets, but of course, when a search result doesn't turn out, then of course, we'll have that no tickets found. So quickly to do that, I'm just going to go to the page in the customers route where you can see we provided the no results found. Let's go ahead and copy that, and we'll switch this to no tickets. You could actually put this as no customers found for this if you wanted to. Let's come back here to the page.tsx, replace this null here after the get open tickets. So we could be specific and say no open tickets found, because there would possibly be other tickets, right? So no open tickets found. And underneath this, where this null is, we could just say no tickets found, or no results found still works here because this is based on the search results. So let's go ahead and leave that as no results found. Okay, we already know how that would look pretty much. So let's not go back and look at that. Let's go straight to the ticket table component and start adding what we need to have pagination. Let's start with our React table imports. We need to add another import here, and this one is going to be get pagination row model. After that, we need to scroll down to our use React table hook. So a little ways down in the code. Here we go. And now we're going to use this. So, we also need to set up our state for it. So let's go ahead and do that above first. This would be our initial state. Now, initial state can have more than just pagination in it. So we have to specify pagination here. Then we have to say what page size we want. I'm going to make it just the number 10, so it's fairly obvious. An easy number to work with, and that might work okay for our repair shop app. They might only want to see the 10 oldest tickets, kind of the hot list to work on. But remember, there will be pagination, so they could filter that and have more results. They could go to the other pages as well. So it's not just going to return 10 results. That's just what they'll see per page. Okay, after that, we need to go ahead and use our get pagination row model. I almost said role model. Then we'll have get pagination row model that we call. Now, can it be that easy? Well, almost. We just need to add buttons for next and previous when we're going between the pages, and we might want to display how many results and how many pages there are at the bottom of the table as well. So let's scroll down to the bottom of our JSX where we can add a div. Some might want to use the actual table footer, but I think I want to add a div underneath the table instead. It will give me just a little more control, shouldn't lock it into the exact column widths that we have in the table, for example. So here I'm going to have div, put the classes on this one, I'll make it flex, justify dash between, so we can send things to the far left and right. Also items center. Now inside this div, I'm going to have another div. Here for this class name, I'm going to say flex and then set the basis to 1/3. So I want to use 1/3 of the width basically. Items center again. Then inside of this one, I'm going to put a paragraph. And then inside of the paragraph, we could use a span. And really, I think we don't need the span. I could probably just put the class names on this paragraph. So let me try that out. Class name equals, and I'll say white space dash no wrap, and also font dash bold. So we really don't want this data to wrap. And then after that, we're going to specify the pages that we have, and then I'll also give the total results. So here we can say page, and this is a template literal. Then I'm going to need to use the table that we get from the use React table hook dot get state, which gives us the table state. Then we can call pagination, then page index. Then we want to have +1 because, as you know, indexes usually start at 0. Then after that, we'll say of, and we'll insert something else here, and we'll use table once again. Then we'll say get page count, which is a method we can call. So this will say like 1 of 2 or 1 of 10 or however many pages that you would have. Okay, after that, I'm going to press return here. Let's Control B to hide the file tree again. But then I'm going to put in just a couple of HTML entities here for space. NBSP semicolon. So that's just adding just a little bit of space in an old-fashioned HTML way. After that, one more curly bracket section here. Again, a template literal. Now I want to put brackets, and I'm doing this, we'll visually see these brackets on the page. And then I'm going to put in the number of results. So here I want table.get filtered row model. And after that, we'll call that method, then have rows.length. So I'm already referring to a filtered row model, and that's because we know we're going to apply filtering later on. So we want this number to actually change the number of results when we filter our results as well. So thinking in advance on that one. I'll put in a space and then have table.get filtered row model once again. .rows.length. And I'll say not equal to 1. So here I'm really just changing the grammar here. So we've already got how many results there are. So that would be the number. But now the word afterwards. So we could have 1 result, or we could have 2 results ending with an S. If we had 0, I would think it would be 0 results, not 0 results. So only if it's 1 do I want the word result without an S. So here I'm putting a ternary, and I'm going to say total results if it's not 1. But if it is 1, I just want the word result. Okay, so I think that completes that div. So this is where we're displaying, and this will be on the far left, say page 1 of 2 with 16 results. Okay, after that, then we'll put in another div. Give this a class name. Set this equal to space -x -1. We're going to have some buttons. We just want a little space between them. So now we're ready to put a couple of buttons on the page. And we may need to import button at the top. I can't remember if we have done that. So let me start with the first button. And we do need to import that. I'll come down to the next line, make the variant equal to outline. On click here, this is going to be equal to a function, and I'm going to call table.previous page. Fairly handy method right there. After that, on click, we'll have disabled equals exclamation mark table.can. No, I'm wrong. It's get can previous page. That reads a little strange to me, but I kind of think, can I get the previous page? But that's what we're checking right there. Okay, very useful methods. Close that off, and then inside the button, we'll say previous. So we just need to fix this import. We can mouse over this, quick fix, and we should get add import from @components UI button. And there we go. So now we've got button imported at the top as well. Now I'm going to copy this. So highlight all of this, Shift Alt down arrow. Now we're going to change this. Previous page should be the .next page method, and this should be get can next page. Of course, this would say next. So now we have our previous and next buttons, and they're using, well, very useful methods that we get from React Table. Okay, with our pagination changes in place, let's save everything and head back to the browser to check it out. All right, I am in the browser now and we're seeing the first 10 results. We can see we have one of two pages and a total of 15 open results here as indicated and completed. I changed one of those, of course, to completed. So we're not seeing it over here. But if we go to the next page, that works, previous works, everything's just fine. Now, the one thing that I do want to change is it looks like I put this in the wrong spot and we're getting the outline of the parent div around our results and our buttons. And I did not want that. So I'm going to go back and move that in the component. I'm back in VS Code and really I just need to change the structure just a little bit. I should have closed out the div that was existing around the table here that would wrap this table, which means we need one more table or one more div, I should say, to match at the top. So we'll get another div here and I'll assign the classes just a little differently. So we'll have a parent div that doesn't have the border, and then we'll still have the one that provides the border around the table. So all I really need to do is change the margin top class to the outer div. And then also I'm going to say flex dash column. Then I'll give a gap of 4, and that just puts a gap really between the table with the border and our page results and totals at the bottom. So once I save those changes now, everything should be good. This still looks like it did here. So to sum up, we just put a closing div after the closing table. And then of course we added the extra div up here to wrap around everything. Okay, if we go back and quickly look at the results in the browser, now you can see some space here. We don't get the wrap around the bottom. And of course, you might want to present these in a different way. I just did this so we could see these results here. Page 1 of 2, 15 total results. So if I, for example, search, now we get 16 results. We still have 1 of 2, and we can see the completed one up here. We go to next, and there's the other 6 results. Previous. So everything is working as expected, and we now have pagination in our project, and that's much more convenient. We don't really have to scroll the page at all now when working on our desktop view. We could just go ahead and arrow through or button through the different pages that have open tickets or results if we're searching for something. And now we're ready to start adding filters to each of our columns. And to do that, we're first going to need to look at the TanStack table docs for React Table. So here I'm at tanstack.com/table/latest, and I believe that's where it'll take you if you just go to tanstack.com and click on table. From there, click on the docs at the top. There's a lot of information here. You could make a full course probably just on TanStack table, but what we want to do is get down all the way here on the left, scroll way down here to examples. Now you can see different code examples. When we click on these, click on column filters. This will go ahead and start up a project right here in your browser. You can see it booting up over here on the right. But the thing that we really want to look at is how they apply these filters. And there's a couple of components we're going to have to create before we actually add them to our table. And they do it all in one file, this main.tsx. Now here, once it boots up, you can see their example over here to the right and how it works. So here's their filter. Let me just search for Ralph that we see there. And now you can see only 2 rows with Ralph showed up here. So it's a good example. And you can play around with that. You can come to the docs and apply any of these things that you see over here with the different examples to your project that you want to. But what I want to do is show you a shortcut because they provide some code for things. And we need to create a couple of components. We can do it quickly with the code provided right here. So they're using a debounced input for each of these filters. And that means as soon as you type in a split second, literally 500 milliseconds, it will go ahead and submit that filter then, but it doesn't search after every character, which is useful because that can make it kind of hang. You really want to use a debounced input if possible when you're submitting automatically. So we can copy this function debounced input right here and create a debounced input in our project. So go ahead and do that. Here you can see it starts at line 300 in their example, and you'll want to highlight that and then scroll all the way down to 327, it looks like. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and click. Highlights all of that. Control C to copy. Let's go back to VS Code and create this debounced input component. Back in VS Code, I'm going to click on the file tree over here, and then I'm going to scroll down to our components directory. Inside of the components directory, I'll create a new directory named React-table. Then inside of the React table directory, we'll create a new component, call it debounced input.tsx. And I'll hide the file tree, then Control V to paste in the code that I got directly from that example in the TanStack docs. Now, this series isn't about how to create individual hooks or anything like that, so it's a quick shortcut to just go ahead and grab their debounced input code. But we're going to want to change a couple of things or possibly import a couple of things. So let's do that here at the top. We're going to need to import input HTML attributes. We also want use effect because it's used in the component, and use state. Okay, now that we have the imports down, let's go ahead and change out the input that is used in it. They're just using a typical HTML input. We're going to import the input that we get from shadcn. And of course, we're already in the components directory, so it gave us the 2 dots, but you could have @/components/UI/input. Okay, so we've got this stuff imported in. Oh, there's also React that it's using, but really, you don't need React. It could be an older example, so you can just, of course, use state. So any instance of React dot here, I can Control D. Looks like 3 more of them, so total of 4 in the file. And just remove those because I'm just using use effect and use state. We've already imported them, so no issue there. They're doing that probably because their example was all in one file. Okay, after that, let's scroll down to the input and let's switch this to the shadcn input that still accepts the props, so no other changes should be made there. We're just using our input component like we are throughout the rest of the application. Now, as I look at the use effect they provided, of course, you're going to get a complaint from ESLint about the dependency array, and use effect is, of course, known for that. Sometimes it wants things that you really don't need to or don't want to put in there. But let's go ahead and put the debounce value in here as well. You can see above, it gets that default of 500 milliseconds, but you could pass in a different value if you wanted it to, the wait to be shorter or longer before it's submitted. Then the onChange function, but this is a function. If you put it in the dependency array, it would just, of course, cause this to run every time. So that's one of those instances where the ESLint would probably ask for something that really shouldn't be in here. So let's go ahead and exempt ourselves from that. We can do that with the comment ESLint dash disable dash line and React dash hooks slash exhaustive dash deps. So that will prevent us from getting an error when we try to build our project based on this not having the correct dependencies, for example. And with those few changes, we have added this complete debounced input now to our project. Well, it looks like we need an export up here, so we could have an export default or export function. I'll just go with export function, and then we'll use curly braces when we do import it. I'm back in the TanStack table docs now, and in this same example that we were in, there is also a filter component. And I'm not going to copy it, we'll recreate our own, but I just wanted to highlight here that the one that I'm going to create is based on this. And the one that they have in this example is actually doing more than we need, so I'm not going to do everything in it. If you're curious about this one, check it out, because it also supports a min-max for age. We're not going to use that, but if you need something like that, definitely check these examples out. Okay, let's go back to VS Code and we'll create our filter component. All right, I'm back in VS Code. I'll show the file tree, and we can see by already having the debounced input open, this is where we want to be. So I'm just going to create the next component directly in the React table directory there. We'll call this filter.tsx. Now here I'm going to start by importing column, and that should come from TanStack React table. After that import, I also want to import the bounced input we just created, and you can see it used the dot. It's right in the same folder, and that's completely fine. I'm just, of course, following the same pattern for all inputs, and that would be in @components, and then after that /React table, and finally to bounced input. Alt-Z to wrap anything down, Control-B to hide the file tree so we can see it a little bit better. Okay, after that, let's set up our type. And this is something that's different from the example they gave. They use a few any types in their example just to, of course, make everything function well for all and not run into any snags. But I think it'd be better to use a generic there. So let's go ahead and have our props type, and we'll have column. Then we'll use column that we imported, and then we'll use the generic once again. The second part of that is unknown. So this props will work, and we are avoiding the use of any, and it still supports pretty much anything we would pass in there. Okay, then export default function filter. Let's go ahead and pass in that generic. And we'll have the column here destructured, and our props, and the generic once again. And now we're ready for our filter function. So we're going to set const column filter value. So whatever the user types in, they're filtering the column, equals column.get filter value. Okay, now I want to have some sorted unique values as well to show what I'm filtering with. Some different options there to basically show what's already there, so it'll pop up and show the difference. But you know what? I don't want to do this first. I want to show you what it's like without them and then come back. So we'll come back to that. Just remember, I'm going to provide some sorted unique values. Let's go ahead and return everything without that list first. So we'll have our debounced input via type equals text. The value is going to equal, let's pass in the, well, here, column filter value. We can see if it has a value, and if not, we'll make it an empty string, and then we'll say as string. So there we go, an assertion. And then on change is going to equal value, it's an arrow function, column.set filter value, and there we'll pass in the value. Let's scroll this up just a little bit. There we go. Okay, after that we need a placeholder. Now we can make this kind of a smart placeholder instead of just having a word like filter or search. So let's do that. I'll use a template literal, put 3 dots. Now this is similar to the example they gave as well. Now inside of this we'll insert something. So we can insert an array from column.get faceted. We want unique values. There's 3 different ones there. Get faceted unique values, and we'll call that method. And then we want to filter that array, filter. So then we'll take our array value and say array.0 of the element. And then we'll check the length. So that should give us a length of like how many different unique values are in the column, and it will display those. So you might have to see that to understand exactly how that's going to work, but it's pretty cool, really. Then class name equals width-full, put a border, let's put a shadow, just a little shadow around the filtered input. You can decide if you want it there or not after you see it. Rounded, and let's give it a color of background card. So just a little bit different than the regular background. And that'll do to start out with, but of course we need to close out the component as well. Okay, so that's going to be our basic filter without that helpful list that I was talking about. We'll come back and add the list. Now let's put the filter in our table and apply the filtering. So let's scroll back to the top where we need to add some more imports from React table. So now we're going to add, let's just put it underneath the use React table here first. We'll have column filter state. And then underneath our get pagination role model, put get filtered row model, and then get faceted unique values. And I can see I've got an error in my import. Instead of column filter state, it's filters with an S before the capital S. So column filter state. Okay, those imports are now correct. Let's scroll down just a little bit. We can see where we've got our use router, our button after use router. Let's go ahead and import the filter here. So filter, and that's going to come from not Lucid React. Let's see, we probably don't need the curly braces. I don't think I put it, or I did put the default export there. So there we go. At components React table filter, and that's because I used an export default instead of just export, and so it doesn't use curly braces. Okay, after the filter, we're going to need use state, and I don't think we've imported use state yet. So let's do that up here after our use router hook. Or use state comes from React, and we'll need that in the function. So now let's go ahead and scroll down, and after our use router hook, let's go ahead and use state here. So I'm going to say const, and then with brackets inside of this, I'm going to have column filters and set column filters. I'll set this equal to use state, and here's the type that we imported, column filters state. And then we'll start this with an empty array. Now let's scroll down to our use React table hook once again, as we have more to put in there. So after data and columns, before the initial state, we'll also put in a state property here, and this object is going to have column filters in it. We'll put a comma because we're also going to come back and add something there in state for sorting. Put a comma after that as well. Now down here, before get core row model, I'm having trouble saying that, we want on column filters change. There we're going to call set column filters. And after that, we'll put some more underneath the get pagination role model here. So here we want get filtered row model. That's what we will call get filtered model. And we also want get faceted unique values, and we will call get faceted unique values. And finally, we're ready to place the filter inside of the table head itself here. So find table head in your JSX, the table head component. Besides background secondary, I'm going to add just a small bit of padding around it as well to separate it. And then we have a div here that has the header.isPlaceholder check. We're going to leave that. So come right underneath that div, start with a curly bracket, go header.column.get and filter. And now put a question mark because this will be a ternary and parentheses. Scroll up here for just a little bit of room. So if this is true, I'm going to have a div render. Class name on this div is going to be grid and place content center. Inside the div, we'll go ahead and put our filter component. So filter column is going to equal header.column. And close that out. And that's fairly simple, but of course we still need the false part of the ternary, so we'll just have a null there. But that's all it takes to place the filter in the header. And of course, we've set everything else up already with the logic from the use React table hook that we brought in. So we followed the docs. We've got a debounced input that's inside of our filter. We've placed the filter in the header, and now this should work. Of course, I haven't completed everything. I told you I was going to put in a list as well. So we'll look at how this looks first in the page, and then we'll go back and see how you like having a data list with the filter. All right, I am back on the tickets page in the app, and you can see we've got a filter at the top of each column now in our project here, and you should be able to tab through them as well. So that makes them very easy to use, and you can see there are 2 different dates available in ticket date, and in title there are 16 different values, but when we click in there it doesn't give us the values, and that's what I'm going to add with the list. But you can go ahead and filter your search. So I can type Dave in here, and of course it waits that 500 milliseconds. Maybe you want to shorten that up, or maybe that's good. But now it filtered it, and you can see we have one page with one result, and that is the one that matched Dave in the tech column. So you can also combine these filters. So here, let's say I wanted to search for J, for example. So now I've got all the first names here that have the letter J in them. So now I want to narrow this down and just get the last names with D. So now we're combining those filters here. First name, last name, JD. Now we've got John Doe. Now, once we've done that, and you've got more than one filter in place, it would be really handy to have a button, say down here, to clear those out. So let's go ahead, go back to VS Code and add that as well. And then, of course, I'll add in the extra part that gives you the list. So when it says there's 5 emails and you click in here, it will give you those to choose from as well. Back in VS Code, I am on the ticket table component. I'm going to scroll down to where we have our buttons here for previous and next. And I'm just going to add another button. So what I'm going to do is highlight the previous button and do Shift Alt and the down arrow to copy it. And I'm going to change the top one here. So I still want outline. After that, the on click is going to be different, and disabled. We don't really even need that for this one. So we can just remove that. And here the on click is going to be table.reset column filters. That's all we'll need to reset all of the filters all at once. So here I'm going to put reset filters on this button. But before we go back and look, let's go ahead and go to the filter component in VS Code as well. Now there's just a couple of things we can add here that will give us a really useful data list, and you may or may not like it, so we'll just provide the option. I really like it, and so far the people I work with have liked seeing that there as well. It really helps them search for the right values, especially in a larger table. So here I'm going to say const sorted unique values. I'm going to set this equal to array.from. I'm going to say column.get faceted unique values. Then we can get the keys from those. Then we'll say dot sort, just calling the sort function there. So that gives us sorted unique values. Now let's wrap our debounced input in a fragment here, because we need another component with it. And of course we have to have a parent component. So now that we have the fragment in place, we have our sorted unique values, we're going to use an HTML element that is very useful. It's called a data list. So now we need to set the ID, set this equal to column.id plus list, and that will just give it a unique ID that we can relate back to the input with. Now inside the data list, we can use our sorted unique values, map over those, have a value, it's the index here. I use a parentheses to come down to the next line, and here is our option, because a data list can have options kind of like a select menu that you would have in an input. So here's our option, set the value equal to value, set the key equal to, and let's go ahead and put a template literal in here. Here's the indexed, but now just so we get unique things, especially if you ended up having more than one data list on a page, which you will, you'll have a data list for each input. Let's go ahead and also add the column.id to that, so it's unique, and then close out the option. So now we've added a data list here that should pop up when we click into the filters. So to do that, we just got the unique values, and then of course we provided them here with the data list. Oh, one other thing we need to do that I almost forgot. So this ID of the data list must match the list prop on your input. So we'll set list equal to, It should be the exact same value that you have up here. You want to make that match so it relates to that input. Very important part. Okay, now we're ready to check out all of these changes back in the browser. Okay, I'm back in the browser. We've already got the reset filters button, so let me click that, and it works. Instantly, it cleared out the filters and changed our results to once again show the first 10 of 16, page 1 of 2. Now let me click in, say, the first name box. And you can see when I mouse over, you get these little arrows, these down carrots here that look like they would for a select menu. And now the data list provides this. Now each browser makes what is provided by default because the data list is just an HTML element. So each browser is going to present these a little bit differently. But you can see I'm seeing the 2 unique values that are here in tech without searching through them. I'm actually seeing them right here. This brings up all 16, and of course it will bring up quite a few, but it won't bring up all of them if you have hundreds, for example. But once you start typing, it will go ahead and narrow them down. So I'm going to type screen, and you can see it narrowed this list down, as well as after the 500 milliseconds, it narrowed the table down. But now once you have it narrowed down, you could pick just one out of the list, and there it is as well. Reset the filters and you're back. So really, I think the data list is a nice addition to these filters. I'll leave it up to you if you want it there. Notice now that we're using icons here, the open and completed match our filters here. So if I choose completed, I only get the completed icon. Likewise, well, now I can't choose open because your choices, that is one thing, your choices are only what is currently displayed here. So I would have to reset, for example, because after choosing completed, you're down to just the one, right? So we reset. But likewise, if you had open, you're still down to just the one choice. So if I did this again, I've only got open, I would need to reset in a Boolean way. That's how that would apply. However, this could be very useful. So maybe you want to keep that in the application as well. I like that feature. And back in VS Code, we are ready to add this sorting feature to our table before we finish this tutorial. Let's close the filter file. Let's close the debounced input. We're left with the ticket table file still open, and that's what we need. Let's scroll to the top once again. We have just a few more imports to add to our use React table. One is going to be the sorting state, and another will be the get sorted row model. Okay, after we've got those imports, let's scroll down to the icons we're importing from Lucid React. We need just a few more icons here. I want the arrow up, down, and I also want the arrow down and the arrow up. Now let's scroll down to our function where we're using state here, and we have column filters and set column filters. Let's go ahead and set up one more instance of state, and this is going to be sorting and set sorting. And we'll set this equal to use state. This would be the sorting state type that we imported. And then for this array, we'll actually have an opening state here, and I typed curly braces by mistake. Inside of this, this needs to be an array. Now inside of the array is where we're going to have curly braces for an object. Set the ID equal to ticket date, and then descending, DESC, to false. And we could note right here that it's false for ascending. Remember, way back at the beginning of the tutorial, we set up our Drizzle queries for the tickets to provide the initial results with ascending, meaning the oldest tickets first, and that's what we want. So we just want this to match that because we're sorting by ticket date here in the table too. So this means it'll all be in sync when we first load the table, and then of course the table can take over, sort the results any way it wants to. Let's scroll down further in the component now, and we're back to where we're creating the columns. And early on when we set these up, I said we would come back to our header here. And this is where we need to add the detail for sorting. So let's go ahead and delete this for now and set up the header to use a function. Now, we can destructure the column here in this arrow function that the header uses. And then inside of this function, we'll put a return and we'll put our parentheses. And now we'll use a button. And the variant for this button is going to be ghost. And let's put classes on this. Set the class name equal to padding left of 1, width full, flex, justify, between. So what we're going to do at the top is set the label for the header over to the left and an arrow up or down to indicate sorting to the far right. And this will be in each column that way. Okay, after the class names, let's go ahead and use onClick. Set this equal to an arrow function. This arrow function is going to have column dot toggle sorting, another method from React table, and we'll pass in column dot get is sorted, which is a method we call, and we'll check to see if it's equal to ascending. Okay, after that, we need to close the button. And now on the button itself, we're going to have several possibilities. So this is an instance here where we just need to check for several things with conditionals. I'm going to put a comma down here before the cell. Okay, so on this button itself, the first thing we can do is say column name and look at the 0 position again. So .to uppercase. This is essentially what we deleted before. And plus column name dot slice 1. So this is giving us the column name once again, and this is going to be sent to the left. So instead of deleting it earlier, I could have just moved it down out of the way. But anyway, there we go. We've got the column name again. Now let's set up the arrows to determine which arrow icon will be showing on the far right of the header. So here we'll say column.get sorted. And if it equals ASC for ascending, then we'll have and, let's put parentheses here. Now let's use the arrow up, class name equals margin left -2, h-4, width -4, and close out the icon. So if it equals ascending, we're going to show the arrow up icon. Let's copy this down with Shift Alt and the down arrow. So we can just switch this out. If this is descending, then we're going to show the arrow down the same manner, essentially. Let's copy this one more time. And this one will be a little bit different. So if the column get is sorted is not equal to descending, and let's go ahead and copy this once again. Just paste it right over here. It's not equal to ascending. So if it's not descending or ascending, we need an ampersand here as well before the parentheses. And now we can show the arrow up down. So it indicates it's neither, essentially. So those are the different possibilities. So we're always going to show the column name, and then we're just deciding which arrow to show. And because of justify between being pushed left and right. Okay, we're almost finished. Let's scroll down just a little bit further to our use React table hook again, where we need to add just a few more things. Let's also add in the sorting state that we'd have right there. And then here at the bottom, after our on column filters change, let's add on sorting change, and we will set sorting. And then after all of the other get methods here, we'll put get sorted row model, and we'll call that as well, sorted row model. And finally, let's scroll down, get all the way to the bottom where our buttons are once again. Let's highlight the reset filters button, Shift Alt and the down arrow to copy that. And let's modify this top one here. So instead of reset column filters, it's reset sorting. And then we'll also switch the label on the button to reset sorting. Now we should have sorting in place. Let's go back and check it out in the browser. And we're back in the browser on the tickets page once again. Let me go ahead and delete the search text param out of the URL completely, load in the page, and now we can see the initial sorting state matches what we get back from the database. So it's sorted ascending by date, and you can see that's indicated right here. The ticket date has the up arrow to indicate it's ascending. So we should see the oldest first. They work their way up, even though in a table we look down. They work their way up to the newest date, which if we go to the next page, you can see is right here, December 2nd. So if I go back to the previous page, page 1, and I switch the sorting, now I've got December 2nd at the top. It reordered all of those based on the date. And you can toggle that back and forth, or you can sort a different column. So let me choose this one. This shows the up-down arrow indicating we're not sorting by that column right now. We're sorting by the one that has a single arrow. But let me sort by title. And now this is ascending, which this would be alphabetical. So I'm starting with the letter B and then A, and then the next one B and L. But we could do it in the other direction, descending, and now the W is the very first one we see. So alphabetically in reverse. So this is working for every column. It's a very useful feature at different points. So combining filtering and sorting is very powerful in the React table. And of course, we've also got pagination. So we've added a table that has some very powerful features, would let any employee quickly find a ticket. We can search for the tickets. Once we have search results, we can actually filter those search results even. So let me say, for example, I'll have DG, and oh yeah, my name's not in there. Let's do J. So now all the results that have a J in there somewhere. So 10 total results. So only one page. But now let's say I needed to filter these down. So if I just click in first name, well, I can quickly find which customer that was and just filter down to John's tickets if I didn't originally search for John. And of course, this is just a made up example, but there could be other examples where you're searching for something much more specific, or you have an idea and you're just not sure what it is. So let's reset the filters back to our original 10 based on our search results up here, not to all 16, for example. So now if we search for something that was screen, we could narrow that down instantly. And let's say we had 3 pages of results yet, and we were looking for all the screen replacements. Then we could just, of course, choose screen replacement, or we could actually just filter for the word placement here. So we reset the filters. We've only got 3 results because it's still based on our screen results. Then I could just search for the word replacement here in the filter, and it would narrow it down to any that had replacement in the title. So very powerful stuff, and it's a very useful table overall. So there you have it. In the next lesson, we're going to actually be able to check off user story number 4 because we still need live results. We're going to introduce data polling. So let's say one of your coworkers completes one of these tickets. You don't still want to see this ticket as open. You want to see just the live results. So we're going to add that to the table. We're going to refactor whatever we decide to refactor before we want to deploy the project as well. A quick shout out to my patrons. Holy Coder is a progress provider. Sean Lynch and Gregory Perry are senior patrons, and all of my junior patrons, Isaac, Will, Stacy, Abe, Ernie, Javier, Michael, Heath, Malik. Thank you all so very much. You're helping me reach my goals. And if you'd like to learn more about my Patreon, check it out at patreon.com/davegray. Remember to keep striving for progress over perfection, and a little progress every day will go a very long way. Please give this video a like if it's helped you, and thank you for watching and subscribing. You're helping my channel grow. Have a great day, and let's write more code together very soon.